like to call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Today is January 25th, and the time is about 4:31 p.m. We have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion for approval?
I make a motion to approve the agenda before us.
Can I have a second? I guess I second.
All
So
those in favor?
we have a motion and properly seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all those opposed? All right. Motion passes. And Dr. Hummer, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first of many Finance Committee meetings that we will have for this proposal of our FY25 budget. First, we are going to talk about a Finance Committee overview, topics and timelines, and then we are going to start working through the Superintendent's FY25 proposed budget, as well as the salary initiative. So all these items are for information only. None of these items are for action that need to go to the board, and we're going to now get started. I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Camry and Mrs. Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hummer, Madam Chair, and Mr. Bell. I don't know how else to say it, or other board members. Maybe I should say that as well. So Dr. Hummer is correct. This is one of many. We have 12 Finance Committee meetings scheduled from between now and April when we hope to have a budget and land with a budget and vote on it. So at the start here, I'd like to go through how we kind of lay out some Finance Committee meetings just to kind of get you all acclimated to how we lay it out, to let you see what's coming up and what we're going to be discussing. So here we have set it for the month of February, and all this information is out on Google, our board docs, of course, as well. So the superintendent proposed his budget last night. So then you see up on the slide here on January 25th, this is our first finance meeting, and you see what's on the agenda. The superintendent's proposed presentation, as well as department and requests that were presented, as well as then we're going to get into the salary initiative. So on board docs, every request from a principal or an account manager, being a director as well, is in board docs. So you will see what did not make it into the budget. So that's out there for you to look at in case there's questions you have about it or things you wonder why it didn't make it. Whatever that may be, that is at your fingertip to see that information. Also, you see up here the other dates that we have scheduled in February, because our main objective is to get you to the February 13th meeting and have covered everything in the operating fund so that on the 13th you can ask any more questions that we maybe didn't cover for you so that you feel comfortable voting on a budget on February 20th. So you adopt a proposed budget. So you'll see how we've laid out what we're going to talk about in the first month of the first meeting in February. We're going to pull up positions and talk about how they got into the budget, how we arrived at those. And then on February 12th, we've got the great CEP discussion that we'll get into a lot of details on that. We may adjust some topics depending on if we start making headway and we're like, hey, we can knock out some more topics, we'll do that. But we have to adjust the schedule on what you all want to do. So if you feel that we're going too fast or we need to talk about things more in depth, that's fine. Just let us know. More than happy to do that. You'll see the very first bullet point of each of these meetings. It says resolve any questions from previous Finance Committee meeting. And what that's there for is to say that you may ask us a question that we're not prepared to answer. So we will definitely answer it first thing at the next meeting. Some things we will know while we're sitting here, and some things we will not. So that's why it's kind of important that we put it on the agenda so we don't lose sight of that, so that we come back at it. If we don't answer your question correctly or we misunderstood, let us know and we'll come back at it again. Okay? So with that being said, we'll go to the presentation. Yeah. And go to the next. Oh, that's right. Oh, I can do it. Actually, I probably shouldn't I? I should be lazy. So here again, we'll just repeat, it's important for us to hit this February 20th date because the superintendent is now handing over a proposed budget to you as a school board. So this is kind of showing how he has now presented last night. Now he's looking for you to take action on February 20th to make it your proposed budget with whatever changes you see fit. So here's some just an overview of how we like to do the Finance Committee meetings. We want to remind everyone again, everything's on board docs. We would like to adhere to the schedule we just showed you because that keeps us on track. That way we don't go down rabbit holes or get ahead of ourselves. That way we're able to talk and keep moving in a way that everybody knows what we're going to be discussing. We know you represent a magisterial district. We just ask that all decisions here are really made for the division as a whole. They're for all students, all staff. Any questions that you may have will be addressed at the next meeting. If you have questions, please email me as well as Mrs. Klein and Dr. Hummer so they know what questions are being asked so that we can address those. The budget is very fluid because we're relying on the state and local dollars to know what our budget should be. So it will ebb and flow as we know information. And there are 12 meetings that are coming up. Some of those may get canceled because we don't know anything different. Because there will be a point where we're waiting on either the state or the local government to make decisions. So then we can come back and make decisions as well. The numbers that you're seeing tonight and in the 12 meetings are what we know of that day. So you may see a number one day, and then 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, we'll come back and give you a different number if something has changed, and we'll tell you about that. We won't just change it. Okay? And then, of course, anything we talk about tonight as far as salary scales are draft. And the reason we say that is because we have employees who will sometimes go out there, we mark them as draft, and they think that's the scale for next year. So we just want to be clear that everybody's not getting ahead of us until the budget is approved, until we've landed with everything. So we want to talk about a term that's often used in school finance when it's talked about a salary initiative. Division average is something you will hear, and a division average means the percentage of all the salary that's being offered is 1%, is a certain percentage. So if Dr. Hummer said, I'm recommending a division average of 2%, that means when we add all the percentages of all the pay scales, it only comes to 2%. That does not mean everyone gets a 2%. It's just the average of all the scales would be at 2%. What he has proposed is a scale average, so that's what you're going to hear more about is the scales. That means we have actually 44 scales, and within those scales, the average will be what he has presented. So scales, that's where that comes into play. And that's usually more the kind of salary initiatives we see are usually on the scale average. Okay? And then all employees, that could be that you all or Dr. Hummer could recommend a percentage that everybody gets the same percentage raise. So it could be a 2%, meaning that all employees get a 2%, so it means every employee gets a 2%, and the average is then not coming into play. And if I go too fast, please stop me or ask your questions. I'm more than happy to slow it down. So we talked about last week what a step movement is, so I just want to remind everyone that a step movement means that there has to be enough funding to go from an employee to go from pay level 1 to pay level 2. Step movements are not guaranteed, that has to be decided during the budget process. Our step movements, besides teachers who are a set amount for their step movements, all the other steps on all of our other scales that are 2.3%. So in order to do a step movement, the salary increase would have to be at least 2.3 or over in order to do a step movement. So Dr. Hummer also, and I'll be referring back to Dr. Hummer's presentation because we have people watching who maybe didn't watch yesterday, so they're familiar with what we're doing. He has come up with a 5-year salary strategy that we are working toward when it comes to our salary scales, because they do need some work. We all know that. So we're trying to move in this direction. So we want to uncluster those years that are clustered together on a pay level. When we see more than 1 year on a pay level, we want to try to uncluster those and break them apart. We want to actually get all of our scales to stop at 30 years instead of 38 like it is on the teacher scale. So we want our employees to say, I'm going to reach the top by year 30 instead of 38, 42, whatever that should be. And we've been working on that because last year I believe the top of the teacher scale was at 42 years experience. And now it's 38. So we are working slowly toward that. We want to attract new talent, so we want our starting salary to be high enough to attract. When Mrs. Frakely goes out and tries to recruit students fresh out of college, she wants to be able to get them to look at us and see that we're offering enough to come work with us. We also want those with the most experience to get a raise. So they stay with us because we've invested a lot of time and effort, and they have a lot of experience to share with in mentoring our new teachers. So we want to keep them here as well. And then, of course, Dr. Herman would always like to at least look at a COLA, the cost of living, each year to help our employees have the same buying power as they did before with their salaries. And I don't know what happened there, but yeah, okay, there it is. So this is just a reminder that the budget, everything that's in the budget ties back to a priority, and this is the school board priority of instructional initiatives. So the scale averages for a teacher is at 6.6. We're trying to see if you guys can kind of unscramble this for us, right? Classified was 6.6. Scale average, other professional was 5%, he presented last night, and then administrators and supervisors were 3.2.
And Mrs. Camry, can I ask a quick question,
Yes.
just for clarification? So the 6.6%, the two 6.6%, and then the other professionals 5%, that is a total including the COLA, correct?
That is correct.
3.2%.
Yes,
and then
that is
the
correct.
additional. Okay.
Yep.
And also too, the step increases, the 2.3%. So fully funded, we would have a 2.3% step increase.
Mm-hmm.
Not fully funded, we would still have an increase, but it wouldn't be a full step. Is that correct?
If it was less than 2.3, it would just be an enhancement to the scale, yes.
Okay,
You're
thank you.
correct. And if it's over that, we would do a step and then an enhancement of whatever's over that.
Wonderful,
So you were
okay.
correct. So if you remember, we just want to remind you of our teacher salary scale because that's our biggest portion of our staff, really are our teachers. So as you see here, Frederick County's in the green, the 30-mile radius that we've talked about in the past is in the blue. And you see that we fall behind everywhere except the top of the scale. But of course, it takes 38 years for our teachers to get to the top of the scale, and most teachers aren't here at 38 years. So you can see how we do have some work to look at. But again, I'll remind you, this is the average of that 30-mile radius, which includes Clark, Winchester, Warren County, Shenandoah, Page, and Loudoun. Did I say Fauquier? I'm not sure if I said Fauquier and Fauquier as well. And then here we just want to show you again of where we fall this year, of where our starting salary is, and that's at $50,000. And you can see we're tied with Fauquier, our 30-mile radius again. So we are near the bottom of attracting teachers to come here. And then, of course, we always, when we talk about Loudoun County, this is the difference. So this is just showing you the difference between the benchmark years of Loudoun County and Frederick County. So again, I need to keep repeating this. We are not trying to match Loudoun County. We're trying to make it difficult for people to want to go to Loudoun County. So when you see this, you'll see that at the start, we are 58.89 behind Loudoun. But where we lose teachers is starting at year 15. Because you can see that big jump from there forward. And then, as we talked about before, VRS is based on the 3 highest years. They do not have to be consecutive. They're the 3 highest years. And, of course, in this whole, these years' experience is usually when we see teachers who have kids starting to think about going to college and having to pay for a big expense like that. And I have to tell you, that's the cutest picture with that little girl having that little hat on. I just think that's adorable. So it looks like everything on these screens jumped on us here. So there you go. We'll just say, Dr. Harmer, you should have done a better job of doing your slides. No, I'm just kidding. So as we look at this in a very bad way here, as he presented, these are the slides that were shown last night, but sure looked a lot prettier when he did it. So right. So COLA for a teacher, you see there we've broken it down. The cost of a COLA is $3.2 million. Their steps, teacher step is a set amount at $1,450, and then an enhancement of 9 basically gives the teachers a 3.2 average there because that's the COLA. If we were done cluster after year 15, that cost about $1.8 million roughly. And to increase the teacher salary to $52,000 is an additional $1.8 as well.
And that 1,450 step, that is for every teacher, notwithstanding years of service, from a first-year teacher all the way to a 38-year teacher.
38 may
average.
not get a step unless we add a step. Yeah.
Okay. So because it is an average of all of the steps.
Yeah, this one is, they're the only ones with a set step.
Got
Yes.
it. Okay.
Madam Chair,
yes.
if I may.
Yep.
Can you do me a favor, Mrs. Carey, Mrs. Anderson? So I actually have the presentation up on my phone, and it actually looks a little better. Can you pull up the Google presentation? Because it's definitely doesn't look like this. And just, oh, I see what happened. You guys are in PowerPoint. If you can pull up the Google presentation, it's going to be a lot more organized. Typically, what happens when you go back and forth from PowerPoint to Google Slides, yeah, it definitely will. Or if you just pull up Google and pull up the presentation. Thank you, Madam
Yeah,
Chair. Just
well-
want to make sure we get the right presentation up there.
We can sign in. Sorry, we'll need to sign into Google to get there. If you like, Mr. Goodwin usually has good jokes. I can turn it over to him to kind of,
Oh, no jokes brought to the meeting. Oh, no.
I'd like the category to be four-letter words.
Yeah, there we go. That one's better.
we were waiting on Mr. Atkins, but now he's here, so we can continue. Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
Sorry, I'm tired.
We're having a little difficulty, so I was just trying to divert everybody's attention.
I appreciate that. If we're in technical difficulties, I'm gonna hit the restroom real quick.
There you go, that's a good one.
There we go. Much better. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, absolutely.
There it is, yes. So with that, the increase of 6.6 is with all these things, the COLA, the unclustering, and then the starting of teachers at 52,000, would then do a salary average of 6.6. And then classified, we have this showing as well. We start off with the COLA, the 3.2. Then we add an additional 3.4% to get that scale up to an average of 6.6 as well. And that's the cost at 2.1. Other professionals, and that's where we'll see the diagnosticians, the psychologists, the therapists are on this scale. They have the COLA, and that group is unclustering at years 15 at a cost of $104,000, giving that scale an average of 5% at $294,799. Back another one?
Oh, no, you're fine.
Oh, sorry.
You say the adjustment of 1.8% for certain positions. Are those three the only positions?
Yes,
That's it, just those three?
just those.
Okay.
We'll uncluster at year 15, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have the administrators, and the recommendation there is just to give the COLA. So that's a 3.2% scale average, and the cost of that is $546,600. The other initiative that Dr. Hummer presented last night is to also give an additional $5,000 for those with 25-plus years. And that's where we get back into this 3-year salary initiative that he talked about, that some will take longer. So the first year he wants to try to do this at 25 years. And that, what we're showing you there, is what the scale for those people who are 25 years or above, what their pay would be on the scale. So that's got the other initiative in there, plus the 5,000 on top of it. So the other initiative we already talked about is 6.6, plus this.
Where would this put us in comparison to Loudon? At the 25-plus mark, what would that line on the chart look like? I'd like to see it come
We can do that
closer.
next week if we can.
Okay, that'd be
Because we
great,
don't have
yeah.
we don't have just Loudons with us
Okay.
right now, so we can do that.
And Madam Chair, if I may, that is a fantastic question because that is our goal. Our goal is to compress that difference the best we can. We're never going to catch them, but we want to compress that as much as we can. So I think that's a great question, and we can definitely show that in another chart.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And as Dr. Hummer spoke last night, next year he'd like to do 20 years and then the following year 15 to try to get those salaries up. Is that right? Yeah.
And this would be $5,000 each year in perpetuity?
And unless we got a scale that would help us get to that without having to do the additional 5,000. So we also have some hard-to-fill positions. So what we've listed on the left there are those positions here in Frederick County that we have. They were showing the total days they were unfilled, and then the average days of unfilled. So you can see that. On the right is the critical shortage teaching endorsement from the state of Virginia. So you can kind of see those listed as well. To determine which possible positions is probably closer to when the budget gets lands, that we would then decide, okay, what positions are really the hardest to fill now as they're going out to recruit. We talked about increasing the sub rate so we can attract people from Winchester City and Clark because we need subs. We do have unfilled sub positions every day. So this, we're recommending a $20 increase for the agreed. They're currently paid $110 a day. Dr. Hummer would like to go to $130, or non-degreed at $95, and going up to $115 starting next year. We also want to increase the bus driver perfect attendance bonus. And we are finding that doing a monthly bonus of attendance for our bus drivers keeps our bus drivers at work, coming to work, so that we're not looking to overload bus drivers, making them have double or triple runs, or trying to get subs that we can't get. So is this monthly bonus, we would like to go to $130 from $120. And at the bottom there, you can see the average number of people at transportation who do receive that bonus monthly. So in FY24, from August through December, that was an average of 132 people who qualified for the bonus out of 239 bus drivers and aides. FY23, we only paid by semester, and it was 56 per semester who applied. So the good thing about the monthly is they can start over if they missed a day because they were sick or whatever that may be. They start over the very following month so that they can still try to achieve that $120 a month. Governor Youngkin, as well, has put in for his budget initiative for the salary increase is a 1% one-time bonus to be paid in FY25. That will take local dollars to make it happen, so it's not all state funded. And you'll see the breakdown there, what state dollars it takes and then what local dollars in order to make that happen. So with that, I'm going to stop at this point, and Mrs. Anderson's going to walk you through. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bell, you have a question.
I do. Can you go back a slide? Mm-hmm. So since Governor Youngkin, with your permission.
Oh, yeah.
Since Governor Youngkin included a 1% one-time bonus in his proposed budget, does that mean that this is something we have to do?
That we have to do the 1% bonus?
Yeah.
In order to get those state dollars, we would have to do it. We would have to do at least a 1%.
Right, but, okay, so we don't have to, it's if we want to do the 1%, then we have to kick in 761,000.
Right, that's
and
correct.
change.
That's
Okay.
right.
Just so I understand.
Oh, sure.
Great, that's a great question.
And as his budget or the state's budget lands, whether it's his, General Assembly, wherever it lands, we'll have more information because sometimes that language might change a little bit. So we'll be bringing that back whenever we hear exactly where it landed.
Thank you.
So now I'll turn over to Mrs. Anderson, and she's going to pull up some scales. Remember, these are scales that are just draft, and they are marked as such, and she'll kind of walk you through what we're looking at this point in time.
Before we get into the scales, I do want to orient you to one other worksheet that's out on board docs for your information. So here basically is the superintendent's proposal on a one-sheeter. We're currently working on our budget document and plan to have that out to you next week, which will definitely be the proposal in a more detailed format and sorted in different ways. But here's a one-sheeter of the budget proposal that starts out with our budget that was adopted for this year last April. And then any adjustments that we're making to that budget, the first of which you see a budget reduction of almost $9 million. That's primarily those federal funds that are expiring. Since we won't have those funds, we won't have an expenditure to go with those funds. And then you heard Dr. Hummer present last night that we made some reductions to departments. And then you see a $1.6 million increase. That is Frederick County's share of a 10% health insurance increase. We're going to increase our contribution. There's no intended increase for the employees' contribution towards their health insurance. And then you see the budget as proposed by priority. And at the very bottom just gives you a quick recap of what the proposal request is of our County Board of Supervisors. So I know that this is going through this quickly, but if there are no questions at this point, it's for your reference. We'll move on to the scale scenarios.
Quick question, Madam Chair. That 1%, we don't need to go back or anything. Just a quick question about that. Is that across the board? I just want that for clarity. Would that include nutrition staff, aides, or bus drivers?
It would be for everyone.
Okay, that is everybody. Thank you.
Yep. So I realize there's a lot of information on this sheet, so I'm going to do my best to help focus our attention. First of all, I've got to find how to make this bigger. Can you see this okay?
Yeah.
Let's see, where is the, oh, there it is. Yep, yep. Is it better? All right. So again, I want to reiterate, this is simply for a draft, just for illustration purposes, to show you what the investment as proposed to the teacher scale could do for us next year. We start out with, you can see the current year scale farthest to the left, and we've also included the number of teachers who are with us today by their pay level, by with that year experience. So you see these years clustering, that it's our goal over 5 years to break apart. This group right here was a result of the Great Recession, where we went 5 years with no salary increases, and that's how that happens. So in the proposal, with a full average 6.6% investment, this is the scale that we could create for our teachers. It addresses a competitive start with our local neighbors, Winchester, Clark, and Shenandoah. It also accomplishes breaking apart those years of experience clusters after year 15. And it would allow us to get to the start at 34 years experience. Or I'm sorry, not at the start, at the max at 34 years experience. So the way that the scale works is you see that you have 40 employees on pay step 1 this year with 0 years experience. If they return next year, they would move to pay level 2 and gain their 1 year of experience. And that's how that's how they move through the scale. It's a common misconception that when you have a teacher who is in one of these clusters, that they don't think that they get a step movement. If that was approved, the cluster moves together to the next step. Okay?
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? You just said there was a 5-year period they didn't get a pay increase. I can't see that because it's too small. What was that 5-year period that they didn't get a?
It was a result of the Great Recession. So that was from, I want to say, 2010 on.
So pretty much coincided with Frederick County?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So The next scale, this 4.9% scenario, still addresses the first year of breaking apart the clusters, but it doesn't get us a competitive start. And you'll also see that the pay step differentials, that's one way we can change those pay step differentials a little bit to meet those funding targets and still give a nice increase. And then lastly, the last scenario is just with a COLA only. So we don't accomplish the goal of breaking apart those clusters after 15 years experience, and we don't have a competitive start.
And just for clarification, the COLA percentage is set by the Social Security Administration, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Are there any questions on the teacher's pay scale before we move on to the other pay scales? Okay. All right. So let's start with our classified. These are our hourly employees, so they are overtime eligible. And again, the proposal was an average 6.6 investment into this scale. That kind of investment would allow us to increase the minimum start by $1 an hour to $16.25. Our board last year was interested in moving towards a $17 an hour minimum start, so we're making progress there if that's the desire of this board as well. Another one of our goals, our long-term goals, is to have salary scales that max at 30 years experience. With this average 6.6 investment, we could accomplish that. So over here in the far right, here's what a potential increase could look for an employee if they return next year. So you know that you'll see that there are some variations there. And when you see the percentages that are under 3.2%, that's because they're already at 30 years experience. So then they would not advance a step. And I believe in the bottom in the footnote, we give you an appreciation of for how many employees that would be. Okay. So moving on to the professional pay scale.
I actually have a question,
Sure.
if you can go back. So for these employees, are there any benefits, or I guess benefits is the right word, for those that receive any type of certs or receive or have a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree or anything like that? I know custodial staff generally has to get certain certifications in order to be able to operate certain things. And I didn't know if that, because of that, that we did any sort of like bump for those particular.
In this last budget cycle, we're starting a program for our maintenance technicians
Okay,
to provide an extra pay incentive for certifications.
all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
So here are our professional employees. They are not overtime eligible. So I want to draw your attention to that in school divisions, we have employees with varying days in their contract. So we have 10, 11, and 12-month employees. So that's important to note. Anytime that you're comparing salaries across the jobs, we need to take that into consideration for a true apples-to-apples comparison. So the proposal was an average 5% for this pay scale. You can see over to the far right what that would translate into for our employees who return to us by their pay grade. And you'll see that the greatest percentages are going into the psychologists, the diagnosticians, and our speech pathologist scale because they, like the teachers, have compression after 15 years. Those are the only scales that currently have compression after 15 years. Now, the compression before 15 years impacts all of our scales. So that's something that we plan to look at over the next 5 years. And then finally, we have our supervisors and our administrator pay scale. And the proposal was an average 3.2% for those scales. And you'll see in the columns for potential employee increases, anything that's under 3.2%, that's because those individuals are already at their max and they would not move a step under this scenario. Are there any questions? Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
What we've presented is what was in the budget, and then what we're working toward. If there's anything that you all think you would like to see us put together, just let us know. We can try to run some numbers, but they would still be draft numbers because, again, the budget hasn't landed. This is our best way of showing what was in Dr. Hummer's budget to get the biggest bang for our buck of what we're trying to achieve. And with that, Madam Chair, that concludes our presentation.
Excellent. I would love to see a graphic depicting that $5,000 bump at the I believe 25-year point, and seeing hopefully that dichotomy between Loudon and us compress. And feel free to throw in the other divisions as well. But I think that would help me visualize it and help give me a graphic to explain to our constituents too. Because I think we're in a very unique geographic position here in Frederick County. Ever since I grew up here, this has been a bedroom community for DC. We've had our Beltway bandits, if you will, that drive in every day and really don't flinch to do so. So that's a culturalism here and then because we are west of the Coca line, we also have that impact and we don't get as much state funding. So it's a double-edged sword. We have a group of folks here who are accustomed to driving distances to work, and they're willing to do that for as much of a dichotomy in pay that we see on these scales. So I think the work that you guys have done is excellent with this. And Dr. Hummer, thank you for incentivizing our teachers to stay here. I do understand we won't quite get to Loudon, but the other things that we're discussing as far as quality of work-life improvements and things in addition to this, I think will make us even more competitive so we don't have that bleed off to Loudon. So thank you for your hard work on this. Yes, go for it. Absolutely.
So this is unrelated to numbers and such, but I'm wondering if we have data on how many student teachers convert into full-time employees in our schools, and if there are any incentives that we could or do provide to them for doing so, from Shenandoah University, Shepherd College, James Madison, and the like.
I'm kind of glancing over here to Katie to say I don't think we do incentivize them to come work for us, but we try to sign them up as quickly as possible to come work for us.
In terms of initiatives we have currently going on, Teaching Fellows, Grow Your Own is in the works. We're in, I believe, our second year of that cohort. We just had an info session. So that is us reaching out to like our instructional assistants, for example, and saying, where are you on your pathway? Are you interested in becoming a teacher? Going through the process to include student teaching, and then having that arrangement where we don't necessarily have to hire somebody if they end up not being a great fit. But that being said, we have already made that connection, and you sort of feel like you're already at home. So maybe that works out to our advantage in our favor. I can't remember what the cohort number was last year. We have a certain number of seats that we get allotted, so we don't get to necessarily set that. I want to say it's less than 12 maybe, but I can get you that data.
Is there any financial benefit for them doing this?
Yeah, they're going through the program, and then it's being paid for, and then I
we're paying
believe
we're paying for
there
that.
is a certain percentage of that, and getting a discounted cost to credits and things like that. And then if they complete the program and do come to work for us, there are built-in incentives, and I can get you all of that information.
Please.
Not to mention what we're doing just internally in HR to help people get on, figure out their pathway. If you come to us with a certain number of credits or certifications, what's your end goal and how can we help you get there? But I can get you that. I can get you that
Please.
information. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Frigley,
Yes, ma'am.
while you're standing there,
Yeah,
actually,
sure.
I had a question pop to mind. And Ms. Anderson touched on it a little bit in her presentation. I would be curious to know at what point in the step or in the years of service do we have the greatest loss of teachers? Like, where do they decide to bail to various
a
other
good question.
locations? Because I hear, just by looking at the pay dichotomy, there's a great difference between us and Loudoun and other schools at the 15-year point.
Right.
And then the 25-year point. I'm assuming that that's where we have our teachers jump ship, but
Yeah.
I would be curious to know exactly, like, on average.
Absolutely. And
where
we
that
can
is.
dig into that because that is a great question in terms of where are they offboarding with us to then
Offboarding, thank you for the technical term.
potentially
Yes.
go and get their greatest 3 years, highest 3 years, right, for VRS purposes, and then either stay and retire or come back to us with those 3 years. So we can definitely dig into that and get that for you.
And that kind of stems from personal experience back when I was in high school here. We lost one of our awesome French teachers at, like, I think she must have had over 30 years. And she went over to Loudoun. And she had been at Sharando since the doors opened. And that was kind of gut-wrenching for all of us seniors to see her go. So
absolutely.
reflecting back just on that personal experience, I would be very curious to
Yes, ma'am.
see.
And it's not
There
uncommon.
you go.
I mean, we hear all the time, we'd love to stay. We love it. Frederick County is our home. I want to work for Frederick County Public Schools forever, but I need to go and get those 3 highest years. So yeah, absolutely. You're right. You're right on track with our thinking there. So we can dig into that and get that to you guys.
That would be great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
sure. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks.
Madam Chair, I do have a question. I would be interested to see the principals be included in the 6.6 that we would be, the average that we're talking about.
I mean, the admin staff, like principals, APs.
Yes, so removed from that, just because I know that they are, supervision and they're administrators, but if you've ever been to a school, these folks are putting out fires all day long. They're, working in the nurse's office, they're in the cafeteria, they're in classrooms, and I just really think that they are some of the biggest, they keep our structure together. They keep our buildings running every single day. So I would be interested to see what that looks like. And then there was, for the professional staff or the classified staff, did we max at 30 years? There, was that correct?
On the classified, I believe if we met the 6.6, we were able to let them max out at 30, yes.
Okay. So I would be interested too, and I think there was a slide where there was a number of individuals over was it 30-year
30.
mark? We were talking about potentially doing a bonus for our teachers over a certain, tenure. Would be interested to look to see what a bonus for them would be for those folks that, have given their service to us, because everybody in our buildings matter, and this, Dr. Hummer, over and over, this is a people business, and, we're keeping our folks here, so I would be curious to see what that looked like.
Just to quickly touch on, outside of our Teaching Fellows program, which is a small cohort, we have great tuition reimbursement incentives too. And we're actually in development now, in talks with finance about how can we tweak that, how can we refine that, make that more accessible, open that pot up a little bit bigger to various job classifications. But that is definitely something that we intend to promote more heavily through our retention and recruitment efforts coming up are our great tuition reimbursement. So if you don't fall into teacher cohort or teaching fellows cohort or some other, specialized situation, that is an avenue we hope to utilize a little bit more and help folks work through, so.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can just make one more public service announcement. So in addition to board docs, we did a snapshot of our budget a little differently this year, and you can actually access it virtually, and we will continue to provide updates. You can access it on our website. We also send it out through our newsletter, so every staff member, community, constituent that has students in the system can access that through email. And then if anyone needs a paper copy, let us know, and we can actually make that. So we want to make sure we get that out to everybody. And it's interactive, and you can click certain things. So we did a little different this year just to get more information out to the community. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Is there anything further?
One more.
Yep.
Madam Chair. This is just an idea I was kind of kicking around in my head, and I don't know how feasible it is, but it seems like one of the things that we do have an issue with, from the HR side, finance side, and school division as a whole, is we keep kicking around that we're losing our teachers with tenure for those 3 years for the highest paid, right? And we're losing them to Loudoun County. Is there any way that we could, maybe around that 15-year mark, beat Loudoun County, be kind of predatory, bring them in, and then maybe they grow roots here and don't want to leave to go to Loudoun County? Is there anything we could do to beat them out at that mark? And then that way we have teachers that are coming up from 1 to 15 shooting for that goal. They're hitting that mark. We're keeping them here, or we're recruiting them back here, and then now they're growing roots here and wanting to stay. Is that something that could be feasible?
We can price that out. So we can look at what their scale is today, and if we matched it at 15 years and above, what that would cost, and bring that to you next on February 6th, if you'd like that. Does that kind of hit the mark?
It would. I mean, even if we are just a little bit below on the tail end, just to get them here and keep them here, I'd like to see kind of what those numbers would look like, because I'm all about not playing fair. If we can beat them over the head of the club, let's do it. Let's get them in and let's keep them. Let's keep these good teachers that we got.
And perhaps if we could even tie that into my request, Ms. Freakley, we'll find out exactly where most of the teachers are going. At what year do they outboard? I think is the yes.
Outboard. That's
Yeah, outboard. I know. I want to say eject, but that's the wrong career field. So outboard. Got it. Yes.
I think sailing.
Yes. Outboard. Yep.
I know it sounds like a fight, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're fighting for our teachers here, and if we can throw the first punch, I bet we'll win. So that's where I'm at.
Well, to piggyback on what Miles is saying, to include in that number would be something along the lines of looking at the average gas prices and how much they're spending on gas by driving from here to Loudoun, and the time that it takes of sitting in traffic. Time is money, and certainly putting gas in your tank is too.
I can advise you on those prices driving to Manassas every day.
Absolutely, and I did it as well for 6 years, and I had to fill my car up 2 and 3 times a week, versus now I fill it up once a week.
Well, and that could even perhaps, if I may be so bold as to suggest, as a recruiting tool. You put those numbers together, especially for a full-fledged teacher coming out of college. Say, okay, well, here's how much of the wear and tear on your vehicle. Here's your average mileage
as
per
well.
week. Here's your average gas price forecasted over the past 5 years, and here's where you break even or thereabouts. Might be.
Yes, you may.
Sorry.
Well, it all ties together, right? It's all
Right.
very much intertwined, and this is why we have these discussions. But we recently did a benefits and incentive survey last year, and we're able to pull out a lot of material and data about quality of life, work-life balance. So to your point about not just gas prices, but sitting in traffic,
Right.
we know that teacher burnout is already a huge factor in why people are leaving the field of teaching, not just the division, but the field. And so how can we address and capitalize on, we're really concerned and here for quality of life in our staff as well as monetary incentive.
Definitely.
Okay.
think that's it.
Any other questions? Anything else? All
Madam
right.
Chair.
Well, seeing no other items of new business, may I have a motion for adjournment?
Never felt more powerful. I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And the motion carries. Meeting is adjourned at 5:20 PM.